My name is Robin Barry and I'm an environmental scientist, and one of my jobs is to go around and teach all the different boys and girls about nature and the environment. So today's workshop is called Be Wise, and it's brought to you on behalf of Meath County Council Library Service. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of pollinators and biodiversity for us humans and for nature. So biodiversity describes all the different types of living things around us. It's the variety of life around us. From all the animals, the birds, the plants, the insects, the trees, the fish, all the different living things around us is what we call biodiversity. So biodiversity is extremely important for us humans, and it's extremely important for nature. So the more biodiversity we have around us, the more different species of birds, animals, plants and insects. So bees are really important part of biodiversity because they were what we call pollinator species, and they go around pollinating so many different types of plants and flowers. In fact, they pollinate up to 3/4 of all the wildflowers all across Ireland that you see in bloom throughout the summer. So bees are super important for pollination, and of course they pollinate lots of our crops, pollinate lots of our vegetables and lots of our fruits, such as our apples, our pears, our plums, our strawberries, our raspberries, our black currants, our red currants, our blueberries. There's huge quantities of fruits would not exist only for the help of bees. So bees are super important for pollinating our fruits as well as our vegetables, such as our kale, our leeks, our onions, our carrots, our garlic, our pumpkins, our sunflowers. There's huge quantities of food would not be available to us humans only for the help of bees. So bees are vitally important for pollination. So what is pollination? Pollination is the vital life stage in all flowering plants, when pollen is moved within the plant or carried from one plant to another plant of the same species. So those little heavy grains of pollen, the bees carry those pollen grains from plant to plant, pollinating the flowers. And when the flowers become pollinated, then the flowers can produce their seeds. And when the seeds are produced, those seeds will then fall on the ground and germinate into new flowers. And that ensures the reproduction of the flowers year on year from the pollination of the bees. So the bees also go around pollinating lots of our trees. They pollinate lots of our hazelnut trees here in Ireland to produce our hazelnuts, and of course they pollinate in other countries our walnuts or almond nuts. So huge quantities of nuts are produced from pollination of bees within the tree flowers. And of course then the bees produce lots of honey from gathering up the nectar from the different types of flowers. So here in Ireland, in around March, April, the bees go around to the dandelion flower. It's a lovely yellow flower that we know grows around our gardens, the hedgerows, the fields all around Ireland. And they will gather the nectar from those dandelion flowers, and they'll process the nectar into dandelion honey. And it's a lovely yellow type honey. And it's very good for our health, very good for our immune system. It's high in vitamin C. So they produce the dandelion honey in around March and April. And then in end of April into May, the whitethorn trees, the hawthorn trees, also known as the fairy tree, comes into flower, those beautiful little white flowers. And the bees will go around to those flowers in the hawthorn tree and they'll gather up the hawthorn nectar and produce hawthorn honey. And now at the moment, the bees are on the white clover. So they're going around to all the fields, gathering up the white clover nectar and processing it into white clover honey. And if you have horse chestnut trees that grow near you, the bees can gather the nectar from the horse chestnut trees and produce horse chestnut honey. Or if you've got lime trees, the bees produce lime tree honey for you. And now, next month, in July, the bees are going to start moving on to the blackberry bush. And the blackberry bush produces a lovely white and pink flower. And the bees will then go to those blackberry bushes and gather the nectar from those flowers, and they'll process it into blackberry honey. So the bees can make all different types of honey depending on what type of flowers and trees are available to them in their local area. So then one of the last honeys they make in the autumn time, if they have heather growing in around the hills nearby, the bees will go around and gather up the nectar from the heather flowers and produce a heather honey. And then the very last honey that all the bees in Ireland will make in the autumn time is our ivy honey. And in around September, October into November, if the weather is good, the bees will go around to the ivy plant and they will produce lovely flowers and they'll gather the ivy nectar. and they'll process it into ivy honey. So the ivy honey and the heather honey are some of the best honeys in the world. They're high in what we call phenols, and they're really good for our immune system and boosts our ability to fight off any illnesses. So Irish honey is really top quality honey, and we're very lucky to have such good quality honey here in Ireland, and it's very good for our bodies and good for our well-being. So here in Ireland we've got 21 different types of bumblebees. So in total there's 99 different types of bees, 1 honeybee species, 21 bumblebee species, and 77 what we call solitary bee species. So the bumblebees are a lot bigger and stronger than all the other bumblebees, or than the other species, as you will see. And this one here is known as the white-tailed bumblebee. It's got a white tail on its hind quarter. And this one here is known as the red-tailed bumblebee. So they've all got different markings, and that's how we identify the different bumblebees, by the markings in their bodies. So we have 21 different types of bumblebees. 15 of those bumblebees are what we call social bumblebees, or they're also known as true bumblebees. And then the remaining 6 are called cuckoo bumblebees. And the cuckoo bumblebees are very similar to the cuckoo birds. They go around looking for other bumblebees' nests, and they will go into that nest and they will lay their brood of eggs in amongst all the other bumblebees' eggs. And they can mimic, they can copy what the other eggs smell like. They can produce the same type of pheromone, a type of hormone, to copy the smell of the other eggs. So it tricks the other bumblebee species into thinking that the eggs are their own. And then the cuckoo bumblebees' young are reared by social bumblebees. So the cuckoo bumblebee can go around to lots of different nests, lay her brood of eggs in all the different nests, get the other bee species to rear her young for her, and she doesn't have to go foraging or looking after them. She gets the other bee species to do it. It's very clever. So the solitary bees. There are 77 different species of solitary bees here in Ireland. They're small little bee, they're quite often forgotten about, or sometimes they're mistaken because they look very different from bumblebees. They're much smaller and come in a range of different shapes and colours. Some are small and black like ants with wings, and some have got black and yellow striped bodies like wasps. So often they're mistaken as other species, but they're actually in fact a little solitary bee. And just like the name suggests, they're a solitary creature. They don't live in big communities. They're kind of what I call loner bees. They kind of live in their own little community of their young. So there's different types. Some are cavity solitary bees. They'll go into little cracks of masonry stone in buildings, or they'll go into the cracks of wood and they'll make their little nest inside there. And then the other solitary bees are known as mining bees. They will burrow down into the ground, they'll make little chambers in the side of hills or ditches, and they will lay their brood of eggs inside those chambers. So they're very clever little creatures, and they're super important for pollination. And they pollinate lots of our trees and lots of our crops here in Ireland for us humans. So they're really, really important, and they're beautiful creatures. Now, of the 99 different species of bees here in Ireland, the 99 different types, 1/3 of those creatures are endangered or becoming extinct. Another third of the species are vulnerable to extinction. So it's only about 1/3 of our population are stable at the moment, but the numbers are going down. So it's really, really important we try and protect their habitats, the place where they live, and try and promote them by planting lots of wildflower seeds, so you can attract in lots of bees to your garden or along your driveways. Or in fact, you can just even, instead of cutting all your lawn in the summertime, you can choose a little corner of your lawn area and let it go wild. And you'll create a little biodiversity area for your bumblebees, your honeybees, and of course our butterfly species as well are also super important pollinators. So our butterflies we have here in Ireland, we have 35 different types of butterfly species here in Ireland. 32 species are residential, and 3 species will migrate to Europe or to North Africa. So in total we have 35 different species of butterfly. Sometimes you get the odd one come in from other parts of the world blown off track. So all the different butterflies we have in Ireland, they're site-specific to different types of plants. So the females have to find their special type of tree or plant to lay their brood of eggs on. And if they can't find their special plant or tree, then they can't reproduce, and therefore they'll become extinct to the local area. So one that we all know here is the yellow brimstone butterfly. And there is a female and a male, so the female is larger. And the yellow butterfly, the brimstone, is site-specific to a special tree known as the buckthorn tree. She has to find that buckthorn tree to lay her brood of eggs on that plant. So when those caterpillars hatch out, they will go about eating the leaves of that buckthorn tree. So they're all site-specific to different plants. And this one here is called the painted lady. and she's a migrant. She will leave in the winter time. Now, some have been found to nest over winter down in the east coast of Ireland. But she, along with her friend here, the small tortoise shell butterfly, and also the red admirals, they use the nettle plant that we're all familiar with. They will lay their brood of eggs on that particular plant, and then those brood of eggs will hatch out into caterpillars and they'll go about eating the nettles. So all the different butterflies we have in Ireland are all site-specific to special plants. And if they can't find their plant, then they become extinct to the local area. Now, these are some of our fritillary species. Okay, so we've got the silver wash fritillary, and we have a marsh fritillary butterfly that's almost extinct here in Ireland. It's only found in 2-3 places in the west of Ireland. And it's protected under EU Habitats Directive because it's so endangered of becoming extinct. And another one that we have endangered of becoming extinct is our pearl bordered fritillary, the one down here in the bottom. And it's a beautiful species of butterfly. And these particular fritillaries, they need plants known as phyllets. And that's the type of plant species they look for. And they have to find their phyllets so they can reproduce their brood of eggs. So we've all different types, and they're all site-specific to certain plants. So it's really, really important that the more variety of different plants you have in an area, the more biodiversity of different species of butterflies and bees will come into that area. So most of the butterflies are quite coloured there, but some are mistaken, because sometimes we have daytime moth species. And we've got our cinnabar here, and we've got our six-spotted burnet. And these are what we call daytime moths. They come out in the daytime, they fly around, and they're often mistaken as a butterfly, but in fact they're a daytime moth. So in total we have 35 different species of butterflies here in Ireland, whereas we have a huge amount more of moths in comparison. In fact, we have over 1,400 different species of moths here in Ireland. Here are some of our moth species. And moths are also very beneficial pollinators as well. And of course then they're beneficial food sources for birds, and in particular bats love eating the different types of moths. Okay, and this is one of the bigger species here now, and it's known as the hawk pivot moth. So some of the butterflies can be dull in colour, and some can be quite bright. So it varies their markings do from species to species. And some of the moths are extremely colourful, particularly our spotted tiger moth here. And the red underwing as well is quite beautiful. So we've many different moth species, and they're extremely important for pollination. And some do fly in the day, and quite a lot do fly at night, so it does vary. And some of the distinguishing features, how to identify the moths from the butterflies, is if you look at their wings when they land. Butterflies tend to fold their wings up over their head, like as if they're saying a prayer when they land on a flower. Whereas a moth species, when the moths land, they tend to fold their wings in behind their back like a bird. And that's one of the distinguishing identification features of the moths and the butterflies. Also, some of our butterflies, you can see here, when you look very closely at their antennae, they've got little clubs at the end of their antennae. Small little kind of round little bulges at the end of their antennae. And it's like a club shape. Whereas the moth species have a very smooth ending to their antennae. Very, very smooth ending. And that is one of the distinguishing identification features as well. That the butterflies tend to have a little kind of club-like feature at the end of their antennae, whereas the moth species go straight out into a little ending. Now, and if you look very closely, we can see here the brood of eggs laid on the leaf of the tree, the plant with the flower. And because the marsh fritillaries found the correct plant, when those eggs hatch out in caterpillars, the caterpillars on the plant that they need to eat so they can mature. So the caterpillars will hatch out, They're on the correct plant, they'll go around for a couple of weeks eating up the leaves of that plant. And then they'll go into their pupate stage, their chrysalis. They'll go through a process called metamorphosis, similar to what frogs go through. When you have frog spawn, metamorphosize and develop into tadpoles, and then tadpoles will metamorphosize into frogs. It's a very similar process for the butterflies. They'll start off as eggs, they will develop into caterpillars, they'll go into their chrysalis stage, into their pupate stage, and then they will metamorphosize and emerge out as a beautiful butterfly. And again, the butterflies go around drinking the flower from the nectars from the flowers, and they've got taste receptors in their feet, the butterflies have, so they can land in a flower and know if it's a flower that they want to take the nectar from. And again, the pollen will get onto its abdomen of its body and onto its legs. So when that butterfly flies onto the next flower, it will pollinate the flower. So they're super important pollinators, the butterflies are for us human beings. And you can see here, here's a dandelion flower that was after being pollinated either by a bee or a butterfly or maybe a hoverfly. And this flower is extremely clever because it's got parachutes on its seeds. So when the wind picks up those seeds, they get blown across the countryside and get dispersed, and eventually they'll land in the ground and they'll germinate into a new flower. So that's really important for the flower. The bees go around gathering up huge quantities of the pollen, and we call the pollen bees' bread because the adult bees feed it to the baby bees, particularly the nurse bees. And you can see here how they've gathered up all the different types of colour of pollen, and you can recognise the different types of pollen by their colour features, so you know what type of plant the bees have been foraging on. So they gather up as much pollen as possible, they bring it back to the hive, and then they process it into the beeswax, and then the nurse bees will extract it, and then they'll feed it to the baby bees. I have a cross section here done of the pollen. You can see all the pollen's been stuffed in there, as much as they can get in, they've stuffed it in, and then the nurse bees will extract the pollen, feed it to baby bees. And that's why we call it bees' bread. Now, here are two common butterflies we have in Ireland. This one here is known as the painted lady butterfly, I was showing you earlier. And this one here is known as the small tortoiseshell butterfly. And the plant that these two butterflies need to reproduce is known as the nettle. And the nettle is a common enough area, a common enough feature around the countryside. But in towns and in cities, you don't have very many nettles because people tend to clear them. So if you do have a few nettles growing down the back of your garden, leave them there in the summertime because they're beneficial to these butterfly species for laying their brood of eggs. And that will mean that those butterflies will then come and visit your garden later on when they come out. Now the honeybees, we'd never killed the honeybees because they work very hard for us. So I picked up the honeybees after they died of old age to give you an idea of their size and what they look like. It's very small, tiny little creatures. And these are all the females. The females are a lot smaller than the males. The male honeybees are known as drones. And it's the girls that do all the work within the hive. They're the real hard workers. You have to be very careful with them because you can get stung sometimes if you go at the hive. But in general, when a bee is foraging and flying around the countryside, a bee does not want to sting you. And if a bee stings you, a bee dies. So in general, the bee does not want to sting you at all. So when they're out foraging, they have no intention of stinging you. If you go near the hive, then yes, the guard bees may come out and try and chase you away. Right, we also have a dragonfly here. And we've got some queen wasps. Now, the wasps have a bad reputation, but they're also very beneficial for pollination. And I found this queen wasp, she'd fallen into a bucket of water and she had drowned. So the wasps are also really beneficial for pollination, and people often forget that. And one of my favourites we have here in Ireland, we've got our dragonflies. And we have 24 different types of dragonflies and damselflies here in Ireland. We have 11 damselflies and 13 different species of dragonfly. Now we do have others, sometimes we have visitors from other parts of Europe the odd time. But this one here is known as the hairy hawker. It's a beautiful creature. And these dragonflies are predators. They'll actually catch the bees and other insects and they'll eat them. But they also can pollinate because they'll land on different types of plants and flowers, and some of the pollen will get stuck to their abdomen and their thorax, and they'll fly off and pollinate other flowers. So they've got beautiful wing patterns. If you look closely there, you'll see all the beautiful wing patterns. And they're a beautiful species. As I said, this one's known as the hairy hawker. That's that species name. Now, what else we got here? Now we also have shield bugs here in Ireland as well. And we have 17 different species of shield bug. And all the different shield bugs we have in Ireland, they are also site-specific to certain trees and plants. And this particular one I have here, these two, are known as the hawthorn shield bug, and it will only be found on the hawthorn tree. And they're a beautiful little creature. And they are very common throughout Ireland, and sometimes if you shake the branches of the tree, the shield bugs will fall out, and you can catch them on a sheet and show the children what they look like. Now, we also have beetles. Beetles are also super important pollinators. And we have the green leaf beetle here. And lots of these beetles are very beneficial for pollination also as well. So we should appreciate the beetles because they also help pollinate lots of our wildflowers and plants around the country. And I actually have a bumblebee here that has its pollen baskets full. So if you look very, very closely there, you will see the pollen baskets on its legs. See the little pollen baskets there. So when each pollen basket is full, they shall return to the hive. You can see the little pollen basket there. And they'll return to the hive and they will store it up to feed it to the young. But unfortunately, this little worker bumblebee, it had died. And any of the species that I have here, we don't kill any of the butterflies or any of the bees. We pick them up after they've died. And my butterfly collection is almost 60 years old. It's a really old collection. Quite a lot of the species of butterflies there are quite rare. So we always, if we catch something living, we release it back into nature. We catch and release. Whereas I pick up any of the insects after they've died and I keep them then for educational purposes. But quite a lot of these bumblebees and butterflies are endangered to become extinct, so we should never try and catch and retain any of those species. If you do catch them in your house, you should bring them outside and release them back into the environment. Okay? So what's happening to these pollinator species, boys and girls? Habitat destruction is a major issue. People are destroying habitats where lots of different species of wildlife and insects live. And if you take away a creature's habitat, you take away their home, so they become homeless. So it's really, really important we try and protect their habitats. And quite often we need to cut down trees, and we need to use the wood for making our furniture, for building our houses, for making paper, and for making cardboard. But instead of planting more trees, people turn the land into agricultural land. So they've completely destroyed all the habitats, wiped out the ecosystem, and they've lost the biodiversity of that area. So if we do have to cut down trees, the smart thing to do is plant some more. Even if you can't plant it in the same area, plant it in an area close by, so you can have an area for the wildlife to move into and use it as a habitat so they can survive. Because quite often people take away creatures' habitats, and if you don't leave a new area for them to move into, and you clear the whole area, those species will become extinct in that area, and that's not good. And that's how we lose species here in Ireland, how we lose biodiversity, is the destruction of their habitats. Now we need roads to get up and down the country here in Ireland, which is really, really important. And if we look at the meadows each side of the motorway here, you can see there's all walls and ditches, and it's just green, 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 green grass everywhere. Whereas back in your grandparents' time, those meadows would have been full of flowers in lots of different colour throughout the summer. But because now the farmers cut the silage in early spring, midsummer and late summer, the flowers don't get a chance to grow, and they don't get a chance to be pollinated, so therefore there's no seeds in the ground. So when butterflies and bees come into these fields, it's literally like a desert for them. There's no food available. So you will lose biodiversity of those areas. So now what's starting to happen is the farmers are now starting to get paid, and it's only right that they get paid, that they come out from the hedgerow or their wall line and they leave an area of the field go wild next to the ditch or the wall. And what they're creating is a pollinator corridor. So they'll leave maybe 2 or 3 metres of all wildflowers along the edge of the field, which they won't cut. So that'll attract in the butterflies and the bees, and if they keep doing that around their farm, the bees will be able to travel around those pollinator corridors, and you'll increase your biodiversity of your local area by doing that. And that's a really good idea, and it's only right that the farmers get paid for doing it too. Now, another major issue we have is extensive use of chemicals on our land and on our crops. So particularly pesticides, herbicides and fungicides really affect lots of different pollinator species. So we can see here people spray their crops, and of course it affects the caterpillars if they're there, they'll get killed. Or if somebody sprays a ditch and they spray all the dandelion flowers, and then the bees land on those flowers, they take those chemicals back to the hive and they can poison the other bees in the hive. Or sometimes the chemicals are so strong, the bees get disorientated and they can't even find their way back to the hive. And if they can't make their way back by evening time, then they freeze to death outside. So chemicals, pesticides and herbicides and fungicides are really damaging our biodiversity and particularly our pollinators. And of course, if we spray lots of chemicals in the ground, when it rains, lots of those chemicals get washed into our rivers, lakes and streams, and it pollutes all the insect species that live there also. So that's not good. And of course, our towns and our cities all across our planet are getting bigger and bigger all the time. So we're taking over more and more habitats year on year. So species are losing their habitat area. And of course, as the towns and cities get bigger, there's more and more pollution created. And of course, that contributes to climate change and global warming. So by the burning of fossil fuels like our oil, or petrol, or coal, or diesel, or peat, they create a gas called carbon dioxide. When that carbon dioxide goes up into the atmosphere, it becomes a greenhouse gas, and that contributes to climate change and global warming. And that's a major issue for not only the polar bears, but for our pollinator species. And in some parts of the world, you get long, prolonged periods of drought where it doesn't rain, there's no water. And of course, if there's any seeds in the soil, those seeds won't germinate. So when the butterflies and the bees come out of hibernation, there's actually no food source from the forage on, and then they become extinct in that local area. So there's huge problems all across our planet with drought, particularly over in California. They've had long, prolonged periods of drought for over 6 years. Western Australia, parts of Africa, huge issues with climate change and drought, and that's affecting our pollinator species. And of course, then other climates, other parts of the world where the climate's different, in parts of Asia we get huge monsoons, you get lots of rain and floods and storm events, and that also affects all the different habitats and species there. And that happens to us here in Ireland as well. We get huge flooding, and that wipes out habitat areas where the bees are trying to hibernate over winter. So no time to pause. What can we all do to help? We all need to be more sustainable. So what is sustainable development? It means improving the way we live now so we don't damage the world for future generations. So that's a really good idea. So how can we do that? We can try and reduce our impact, reduce or eliminate those pesticides we use, those chemicals that people put in the ground. We could increase green spaces and minimise urbanisation. So if we're building lots of houses, we can maybe put little green areas in between the houses so bees and children can all have a green area to hang out in. And of course we need to minimise our pollution and cut back on our greenhouse gases like our fossil fuels so we can try and protect species from climate change as well. So that's a really good idea. But what's really important thing is we can all plant for pollinators. We can create pollinator friendly habitats with native flowering plants that supply both nectar, pollen and a habitat home for these creatures. So if we plant for pollinators in our schools, in our local communities, in our gardens, this is going to be really beneficial. And of course, one of the most important things we can all do is tell our friends, teach our mums and dads, our brothers or sisters, our cousins or neighbours or grandparents about the importance of pollinators. So people become more aware and try and protect those species. And you could even host a pollinator cook-off dinner with your family to try and educate other members of the family about the importance of our pollinators and show them all the different vegetables and fruits that pollinators produce for us human beings so people become more aware of their importance for us. And of course we can let the area around our driveways and our houses go wild. The county councils now, instead of cutting all the grass alongside the roads, some of them are starting to leave the wildflowers grow. So they're creating pollinator corridors around the side of our roadways, which is a really good idea. And also at home, instead of cutting all the grass in our gardens, we can actually leave a little bit of our lawn go wild, and we can create our own little biodiversity area within our own garden. And if you let the wildflowers grow, you'll attract in the butterflies, the bees, and you'll be finding them with nectar and pollen and shelter as well. So that's really important. We can all do that, leave a little bit of our garden go wild. And of course, if we're all energy conscious and we start using green, clean energy, that's better for the environment as well. It doesn't cause as much pollution, such as our wind power and our solar. So that's really clean energy, less pollution from the solar power and the wind. And of course we can be energy conscious as well by switching off our lights and our TVs and our computers when we leave home or if we leave our room. So therefore we're cutting back on the amount of fossil fuels being burnt, and it's less carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, which is beneficial for climate change and global warming. So we can try and protect ourselves and the pollinators in that respect. And of course walking and cycling to lots of places is really important, and planting for pollinators also is great. And boys and girls in other countries are realising this, so they're starting to plant for pollinators. So they're planting plants to help their bees and their butterflies and stop them from becoming extinct in those areas. So by planting plants to help those creatures, you're going to increase the biodiversity of your local area, which will also be beneficial for farmers when it comes to pollinating the crops. So boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'd like to thank Meath County Council Library Service for sponsoring this workshop. On their behalf, thank you very much. And don't forget, boys and girls, it's really important we all be wise and try and look after our pollinators and protect nature and biodiversity. So till next time, we'll see you again. Bye!